Alrighty. Community, good to see you guys. Jean Paoli, always a pleasure. As usual, we're going to give everyone just a minute or so to kind of file in and get ready. But as you can see in the comments, we already have some of our staunchest supporters and friends here. I see Katie, DeFi Crypto, Vikram Singh, a bunch of our friends are here already. If you're joining in, make sure to comment where you're watching this from. I'm in Hong Kong like normal. And we're very fortunate today to have Jean Paoli calling in early on the West Coast from his home in Seattle. Well, technically Bellevue, I guess, but Pacific Northwest. But we want to effectively continue our series of conversations around the different use cases and the different parts of the NVNM ecosystem and the NVNM chain specifically. A few weeks back, we talked about NVNM site with Albert. Now that's live. 2 weeks ago, we talked with Richard, who's leading NVNM IO and how it pertains to the chain and all the different transactions that it's going to bring to NVNM chain going forward. And now we're talking with Jean Paoli. And as you can see, we have people coming and calling in from all over. Duster calling in from Japan. I see Grüße aus Österreich. So we have someone in Austria. Katie, I believe, is in Turkey. So truly an international community here. Spanning pretty much all corners of the globe, given where you're based. Jean Paoli's been here with us before, and we had a great conversation a few months ago now. It's been a while, but it's always a pleasure to chat with you and spend time with you. And thank you for coming back on to share some new interesting insights with the community today.
No, really, thank you. Really, and seeing all the everybody from all over the world, it's really an honor. Yes, you're right. I am in the Seattle area. Technically, in a beautiful little area called Kirkland on the lake. So it's just gorgeous here.
Amazing. Well, we appreciate you getting up early because I know it's a really early morning your time. We introduced yourself and Docugami and all the different things that you've been building over your storied career. But I think it's important for the community to kind of hear that story again. So if you'd be so kind, could you introduce yourself again and your background and tell us a little bit about all the interesting stuff you built as a inventor, a foundational technologist for the internet, and a storied professional career at Microsoft.
Yeah, so thank you. I was born in Beirut in Lebanon. Then I moved when I was 18 to Paris. There, I was lucky to meet and work in startups of INRIA with the best researchers. Really, a lot of very fundamental researchers like Gilles Kahn and others who really taught me everything. I was the developer, the CTO of startups, and I was always kind of helping put on the market crazy ideas coming from this kind of very, very smart people. And then Microsoft hired me and I moved here to. I said I'm in Kirkland, Bellevue, Kirkland, Redmond. All of this is near the Microsoft campus. And what I do fundamentally, and that's what I learned from all these researchers since a long time, is just I know how to transform documents to data at scale. And this is something I started a long time ago. That's kind of what my passion is, and that's what I kind of wanted to do all my life. Is documents are very complex. I mean, they are deceptively simple. Today you can ask a question using ChatGPT or something, it answers. And so that's the first thing I wanted, was to have a way of moving data from one computer to another as documents. And that's why I created XML. XML is a way, or help create XML, sorry, I'm just, with my friends in the industry, this is basically a way of describing documents that could be very messy. We're talking about documents that are not like 1 page or 2. We're talking about documents that could be 2,500 page long, and many of them, like lease agreements or commercial claims or rent rolls or all these things, or contracts, like those things are very long and sophisticated and complicated, and the machine creates them, the humans interact with them, so they are very complex. So I always wanted to make those become data. So that's big thing I did at Microsoft. Helped create the docx format of the and PPTX format and XLSX format that are used worldwide by Office, by many other people. I'm also an openness guy. I love open source and open standards, and I believe that working with communities, with other people around the world is critical. And so I helped create the open source subsidiary of Microsoft, and had my own subsidiary in China at a certain point. And then we enabled the open source community to start running their software and their code and collaborating with Microsoft at scale on Azure and other places. And then, that led, then after that, obviously Microsoft, since a long time now, is a big friend of open source. They bought GitHub and all of this, but this is a big part of what I do as well.
Amazing. Could you, maybe tell us a little bit about some of those challenges you faced? You've developed some very fundamental technology and created kind of groundbreaking changes within a very, very large organization. I mean, one of the world's largest organizations, period. Could you tell us a little bit about those challenges you faced and some of those experiences you had with, well, one, getting, a standardized approach to something like a document or docx or PPTX? Like, how did that work for the community to kind of understand that challenge? Because I mean, now everyone uses docx, PPTX. I mean, literally everyone in the world uses this. How did you bridge that gap?
Well, actually, the problem is not in the organization. The problem is literally to show the business value of doing anything. So everybody has always a bunch of ideas, and you just basically explain why is it useful. And so from a pure, if we talk about docx, PPTLX, XLSX, the most important is to basically explain that, well, when we arrived into the place where the cloud became important, what you needed was to be able to have humans create documents on one side and then send those documents to third-party processors so they can understand them, for example, to index them or to search them, that were not necessarily Microsoft software. To do that, you needed to basically have something in the middle that anybody can open. Docx is practically a zip file. And so you open it and there's XML in it. Because I did XML before and was adopted worldwide, then you have a lot of other people who can go build product and software without talking to Microsoft. So that was the realization that was important from a business point of view, was the most complicated thing. And so you have to demonstrate it. You're not only to say it, you have to go find customers, you have to talk to them. They need to do prototyping with you. That's why, importantly, working in open source and open standards are important, because you actually collaborate with people that do not belong to your organization. So that's kind of the most important, is making sure you understand that working with people who don't belong to your own company is super critical, and it's easier said than done.
Of course. Yeah. Of course. I mean, I think there's a lot of parallels to what we're trying to build together now with NVNM Chain and DGML, and getting this kind of new way of doing something adopted by not just the industry, but frankly, the world. Yeah. And by the world, we're also talking not just humans, but rather humans and their agents at this stage, right? So so it's some machines, it really is a different paradigm, but there's still a lot of parallels. And obviously, I for one am excited to work side by side with you on this. And obviously leverage your experience of having done it not just once, but several times before. So I think we're the mantra community and the NVNM Chain community is very happy and very lucky to have you on our side, basically.
It's a pleasure to work with everybody. Frankly, it's not it's just I learn a lot of things all the time, which is really fun. And from you, I had no clue how blockchain worked and crypto and NVNM Chain. So I just was telling you that a few seconds ago, right? So. But yeah,
no worries. We're gonna get you to become a crypto native in no time. So the last time we spoke, which was a few months ago, I think it was right around the time when we announced our acquisition by NVNM. I think we had just announced that, and then shortly thereafter there was a partnership announcement that NVNM did with your company, Docugami. And the premise of that partnership was to create an open source standard, which is now called DGML. Could you, talk about what is DGML? It's now live. So maybe you could talk about what is DGML, how's it work, what's going on with it, what's the status, what's the plans. I think that's really what the community really wants to know. And then we'll get into how does it actually interact with the chain.
Sure. Yeah, sure. So, if mean, what I like to do is, since a long time, I wanted to have documents become data, so it could be used at scale, as you said, by humans and machines, right? And machines today are called agents. So,
Yep.
and so there are multiple steps, and here I just want to make sure I explain that again, that documents are deceptively simple, but they are very, very complex. So when you look at, for example, a rent document, there is inside of this document a lot of information, and it could be a 50-page, 100-page long document, depending how complicated it is, right? But there are information in it that are, for example, the rent value. How much is it? When do you need to pay it? It's at the beginning of the month or the 5th of the month. All this information. So you can take two approaches to understand what's inside of document. One, you can basically say, try to extract this information. That's what everybody does today. Okay, so out of 500 pages of document, you extract 5 things. Okay, 100 things, right? But not the whole thing. You don't understand the whole document as data. Sure. So that's option A. It's interesting. That's what everybody does today. I personally have been, since a very long time, thinking the entire document is important, the whole thing, okay? Because a document is a set of paragraphs that are one after the other. Context is important. If you say the word 500 in a certain place, it could be $500, could be 500, like different, euros. So all of these things is important. And what humans do is they read the whole thing, or they try to, they don't just go and try to find 5 things. So that's how I think about documents. The other thing is, the way I think about documents is you have in general documents that kind of talk about the same thing. And so, when, the whole XML philosophy is to say, well, if you have, let's say, documents that are around rental and insurance and invoices, and they are all mixed together in a folder, well, let's first try to sort them into different categories. So here I just gave 3 categories that are easy to understand: insurance, rental, and invoices. But because humans don't organize themselves across the world in the same way, you don't have a predefined list of categories. You understand? It's not like somebody said there's an invoice category and everybody follow those standards of doing invoices, and first what you need is to understand that documents are complex. Number 2, that you cannot pre-categorize them. It's not like there are 20 categories in the world. So you need to, when you group them into into categories, you need to also be able to name them intelligently, create those categories. And then once you go inside of them in the documents, you need to be able to represent the entire documents into a set of information that is, my friend researchers told me to basically use a very strict tree instead of using a very complex graph, but with some links. At the end of the day, it becomes a graph. But documents really are very oriented to be heavily represented as tree with some links. Anyhow, so I will give examples of all of this, but I mean, that's kind of the overall thinking, if you want, from a theoretical point of view of what we are trying to do. So I've been doing this since a long time. And now finally, the last bit was being able to be done using AI since a few years. So that's why I left Microsoft, created Docugami, and started literally since a few years creating this format that's now is called DGML, that we just open sourced and we want to standardize. Sorry, that was a lot of things, but
no, that's great. I know that there's something that you want to actually kind of show this, because again, DGML is live, it's open source, and I think for the community's benefit, taking that theoretical perspective that you just mentioned and putting it into a little bit more practical, real use cases is perfect. And given that it's live, why not better to do a little bit of a demo, I guess.
Absolutely.
All right, so let's get this shared up on the screen. This will be the first demo we've done on a Community Connect. So it's a first for the Mantra community, and it's done by no other than Jean Paoli. So I think they should be very, very excited about that.
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. And please tell me when you can see my screen.
All righty. It is loading. We can see it.
Okay. All right. So, all right. So the first thing is everything I'm going to show you here is a demo. You can do it yourself, right? So if you go to www.dgml.io, we basically launched this site, I don't know if I remember, 1 week or 2 weeks ago, something like this. And it's basically the home of this new initiative that we just launched, and everything is open source. Just want to make sure, and we are creating a standard. So the difference between open source and standard is, think about it. One, a standard is in general a specification, it's a piece of paper. So you can go and click here on the read the spec. It all goes to the same GitHub. So if I click here on GitHub, it's just going to go to github.com/dgml-io. Everything I'm showing you is there, literally. And so you have basically a few repository. One repository, one repo is called DGML spec. And if you go to the spec here, it's all here. And I'm inviting people to start commenting and give us feedback and all of this. So the spec is here. You can read it. It's just a big, long piece of text. And that's very important because when you, when you explain something and you define it formally very well, it's very important because, it is, this is what makes a standard versus just a piece of technology that could be changed all the time. So that's the spec itself. And then here on DGML-io DGML, there is a reference implementation, meaning there's an open source implementation that you can try and also find. But I'm sure there are bugs. It's always the same thing. When you work outside, you encourage people to go try and look at it. And you can start running everything I'm showing you here by yourself and contributing. And that's kind of what we are trying to find here is to, because we just launched it, to actually have, again, third parties, people who have not connected to Docugami or NVNM or Mantra or anybody that really want to go and come and just try it, say us what you like it, find bugs, because I'm sure there are bugs. This is how it is when you work with people outside. There's always bugs. So that's the first thing. So it's open. And now what it is the following. If you look here at, my view of the world is if you look at a document, and I'm going to kind of, just show you this. I don't know if you can see that a piece of document is basically, I was talking about rent before. Now, what we do is we represent, imagine an entire document that we represent like this. You have a, of course, I'm using XML. I'll explain why I'm using XML in a second. So there's a monthly rent. That's the value. And it's, the text could be complicated. It could be the lessee shall pay a monthly rent of 500, 8,500, and then commencing on, and that's the date, subject to review per. So that's just a small paragraph that's being organized like this. Now imagine thousands of documents in many different categories that we can organize and split into some categories, name the categories, and then each of the documents are represented entirely in this kind of way. Okay, so that's what DGML brings. And I'm going to give you a demo of that you also can try yourself. That gives a little bit, give you a little bit. So if you go to dgml.io here and you click on this button called Try the App Sample. So everybody can do that. It's just a website, right? So it's, okay. And so here you see that we have 4 demos we did, one on non-traded NAV, one on commercial mortgages, one on credit funds, one on infrastructure funds. Those are real scenarios. It just show you that, for example, on this particular one, the documents that are involved for trading, non-listed properties, there are two kind of categories of documents. One is called a commercial lease agreement. Those are documents that are very known from anybody into the business. And also you have another document that basically tells you what are the rent roll reports, meaning how much, who paid how much every month. So the DGML, if you give those 10 documents in one folder, all of them without naming them, whatever, there is first a set of technologies using AI that can go and split them into two categories and name those categories. We called every category a document set. So here the AI literally went and named those categories: commercial lease agreement and property rent roll. Remember, every business has different categories. You understand? Like we cannot go standardize all the categories of the world. That's something I strongly believe in. You have some people who think that we can. I thought that always lets 1,000 flowers blooms, right? It's always bottom up working with. So those names are like this. And then, by the way, if you don't like them, you can rename them. And then now you have them. And then every document, this one's called Olympus Plaza. If you look here, when I'm moving my mouse, all of this, by the way, has been generated automatically. Everything I'm showing you here is generated by the DGML open source reference that you can play with. Okay, there's nothing here predefined. And here, if I go look, the DGML is described here in this view. It's just a window showing the XML. And all of this has been generated automatically. For example, that here you can click on base rent. You see base rent. And base rent is a tree. It shows you. So on the left, there was a PDF file. I should have started by this, or a docx file. A PDF file could be literally a scan JPEG, right? So with what we did is we transform it automatically into this thing here. That's an XML in DGML. And when we transform it, we remember the coordinate of where we found this information, which is why when I click here, you see the box here. Okay, so it's basically a page number plus a rectangle, and could be multiple pages or multiple rectangles. All of this is in the format. But the most important here is that now I clicked on this, and and now the document itself is represented as data. You see, it's lease agreement. We are not saying the documents is in bold or italic or a section or a table. We gave names here to every piece. That's kind of the support. That's the idea of DGML. And those names here have been also invented by the AI. What's interesting, though, is, like, for example, base rent. All these names, some people call them an ontology or something. It has been basically, I call them semantic, elements. But basically, this base rent, now you're going to see it in all the documents in the same doc set. So that's basically created a normalized, if you want, a vocabulary. Those words here are called vocabularies: base rent, premier description, and it is normalized, meaning it's used consistently across all the documents inside of the same doc set. So basically, we transformed an entire set of documents. Is literally a semi-structured database. All of this using XML files, and we remembered at every level from where it came. Okay, so from which PDF it came and exactly where. And you can see here that the documents could look very, very differently. Like, for example, this one, secure credit agreement. It's a very different kind of document. You can see I can scroll. And so that's independent, but it's the same kind of secure credit agreement, etc., etc. And then what's fun is the link between this and NVNM Chain is then I can go and say, well, now that the XML, the DGML has been generated like this, and this is literally a demo, right? Like just not, if I'm running it through the browser, so it's not going to go directly because the browser, but if you run the same thing using a Python and all the instruction are as a server, all the instruction is in there. Then you can basically, when you click here, it basically selected one subtree, which is here the base rand, but you can select many more. And at certain point, we say anchor on chain. And here, if I click on anchor on chain, what's going to do is it's all running code. First, it can show you the subtree. You see, this is a subtree. You see those, tags instead of tags instead of tags. Yep. And then you can go and say, okay, because this is just a demo again. You just write it once. I'm just faking this. You just do it one. Then you can basically click here on the demo, anchor on chain now. And if you run it really, it actually would have done it. And then here it says it did it. And then you can go and basically say, well, now, then basically you can say, verify and all of this stuff. So that's basically the basics of what I'm doing here. And then you can ask why, which is a different conversation.
Yeah. So I think the why is important, but fundamentally, I think what is also important for the community to understand is now we're not just talking about taking a single document and attesting it and anchoring it on chain, which if people recall back to the conversation we had with Richard 2 weeks ago, we're talking about millions, tens of millions of documents that are supported by hundreds of billions of dollars of assets behind them that are changing and moving and adapting on a regularly occurring basis. Now we're talking about specific data points or piece of information within a document that could also be anchored on chain. So it's almost like a factor above the amount of information that you can anchor on chain. Is that kind of the way they should be thinking about it?
You are completely right. I mean, we are talking about real world scenarios here, John Patrick. I mean, when you are talking about a company that owns a lot of buildings, I mean, this is commercial. We're talking to these kind of people, or could be ports. I mean, NVNM, manages actually a big port in Florida, the containers, or hotels in the United Emirates. Like those companies have a lot of properties. We're talking about changing how those companies literally manage their business, manage their properties, and at the same time, define the value, and so a potential investor or other people can go and say, wait a minute, I mean, you had a lot of people occupancies, or you did not pay too much, money to maintain those properties. I mean, we're talking about real business here, and so you can imagine you have like a lot of document types and hundreds of thousands of documents, if not millions of documents. That's what happened, and they change all the time. Remember, rental is taken every month, right? Like construction and fixing things. That's life, right? Like it's not like a static thing. This is we're going to scale here. And so if you see here also, the categories of documents are illimited. It's not like we support 15 categories of, we call them document set. Every business has different kind of things. That's why I'm saying documents are very complex. It's just humans are not accustomed to that, because remember, how do you create a document? You wake up one day and you say, this is what I need for my business. And you just take something that already existed before, you change it, or you create something new. And the sky is the limit. That's why people continue using documents. A lot of people say, well, why don't you use a database? Or why don't you use something in a form? Is because humans think as documents. And documents these days are generated a lot by agents as well. So when I say I mean, it's, So that's the first thing. The second thing I wanted to show is, I just did this a small conference a few days ago and did this this little diagram that basically explained a little bit the reason why we did DGML in the first place. And there are really two reasons. So let's start first by, what do people do today without DGML, right? There's, I'm sure anybody who tried to use, any LLM, by the way, we're all talking about, we're in an LLM world. Like, I'm not going to explain why it's important to use LLMs and things like ChatGPT, and all of this. Like we in Docugami, at least, we have been doing that, using transformers since literally a few days or a few months after the initial paper that created the transformers by the Google people did. So, so in 2018. So what people do today to actually understand documents, a lot of people use what's called RAG. And so they basically, you need to understand there's a big difference between little demo and something that works at scale. What people do is they take a lot of their documents. And when you take documents like PDFs or docx or anything, when you start sending them directly to the LLM, it costs a lot of money. So everybody heard about token economics and all of this. It costs a lot of money, right? So what people do is they don't take PDFs. Remember, PDFs could be scanned PDF. Remember, it's like it could be literally images, right? So you're not going to take each time you want to ask a question, your entire PDF, send it to an LLM, pay the money of understanding 500 page. Like it costs money.
Yeah.
Everybody's talking token economics now. I'm not going to explain to you how much money because it's really a lot of money. So what people do today is they use something called RAG, and what they do is they send those documents once to an LLM, and 90% of the world today generate a simplified view of this document in Markdown. Now we all know what Markdown is, I suppose, right? Like,
Yep.
So
of course,
same thing, right? So again, I'm not going to explain that, but people do that. That would do 90% of the world today, and we're talking about massive amount of people. They take those PDFs and docx, because that's like the two most important formats that are used today. They transform them to Markdown, and then they basically have an agent or an LLM ask questions on the Markdown. That's what people do today, 90% of people. So the problem is when you transform it to Markdown, Markdown is great, but it represents literally a small version of HTML, meaning it just shows you bold, italics, some stuff like this, list. I mean, it's a very supervised way. So you lose a lot of compare this with the DGML I just showed you.
Sure.
What you gain in simplicity, you basically are making the job of the AI talking to the Markdown more complicated. That's what it does, which means that, when you, instead of Markdown, we are telling, and so a lot of people started seeing actually the limitation of Markdown, because we went from demos, which was started maybe 1 or 2 years ago, people who do demos to their CTO, to their CEO, to in production. Then I said, wait a minute, you're in Markdown, you lose tables, for example. So literally, so people start saying, instead of Markdown, can I use HTML? And then all of a sudden, you have a different problem with HTML, because HTML could be too verbose. So people are asking questions like, what should I use instead of Markdown? We propose to use DGML. That's the first reason, because DGML does not lose anything. You saw what we have here. It's even more, we have semantic information, and we will be publishing soon in the next 1 month or 2 on the GitHub, because everything we'll be doing is open here. That we believe that the ratio of quality and token is higher if you use the DGML instead of using Markdown. We will be publishing all these results in the next 4 weeks. So that's the first thing, okay? It's token.
So better and cheaper.
That's right. It's better and cheaper. So that's the first reason.
Sounds like a good deal.
I agree with you, and it's actually, it's launched, right? Like, it's there. You can already, you go to dgml.io, and everything I'm telling you can test it by yourself.
Amazing.
And the second thing is, that's the first reason. The second reason is what I can do for trust. And that's where we're discussing, and the collaboration with you, JP, is on NVNM Chain, is, well, so, so we believe in decentralization. Remember, I am a big decentralization, bottom-up guy, and in everything we do. And so imagine you are a customer and you have all your documents. Well, the first thing is, I'm not going, everybody talks about data sovereignty, meaning I don't want to give you my data. I don't want to give somebody else my data. It's my data. So I'm going to first imagine I have all these PDFs and docx. I'm going to keep them wherever I keep them today, in whatever vault I have, be it, I don't know, Dropbox or SharePoint or S3 bucket or whatever, right? Like, it's the place where I put them today. And so what we're telling people, what we're telling people is, well, near your PDFs and docx, generate the DGML. Okay, and you have an open source software here that you can use. You don't have to talk to us, but generate for every document the DGML, near it, put it somewhere nearby. Okay, that's completely, transparent. It's very secure. I mean, we don't interfere with it. We don't have no clue. It's open source. We're not spying on anything. It's just a a way of, if you do that, and then many people do that everywhere. Now, if I'm imagining an investor and the scenario is somebody has a lot of properties and you have an investor who want to understand what's the value of these properties, what are they doing? So remember, I own the buildings, I own the properties, my documents are in my own vault. Well, how can a third party, an investor, trust my what I have been telling him, right? Like I could have changed those documents. Imagine I showed you 3 months ago that I had a great rentals and they didn't pay a lot in maintenance, and I showed you those documents, and then 3 months later you come back and I change these things because this is investment. You need to be able to do due diligence. It's not like it's not like people are dishonest. It's just you have to do that before you invest. You do due diligence. You're fiducially, this is your role, right? This is what you do. Because you're investing the money of other people, so you have to do that. And so here, what we're proposing is basically you say, look, you don't have to, trust and verify. Basically, you do your DGML now, because DGML represent the data like this. Remember what I was showing you here is how DGML works. Number one, you give us a bunch of documents. The DGML create the doc set, meaning split them into those categories, create those categories. Then for every document, create this tree, right? It's technically it's a graph because there are links from between nodes, but for simplification here. So you have things like identification clause that contain a liability cap and an effective date, and those are the values. So that's a subtree. So the innovation, because now we have subtrees, what we're saying is, take not only the entire document, which people can do today already, but you can take portions of that document, which is a semantic portion, which makes sense, right? Like here. And you can hash this, and then you don't store anything on chain except the hash. See? So all of a sudden, and then you keep your DGML in your own vault. You just didn't, but then people, third party, can go double check every month or every 2 months or every 3 months. They can basically, if they want to double check, you give them access to your files, but they know you didn't change your files in the meantime, because then it's very simple. The hash will not work. And because if you change it, the hash will not work. And because you put it on NVNM Chain and a blockchain, it's very difficult to go and change the hash, or almost impossible. That's
basically impossible. Yeah, basically impossible.
So, and that's what's important is nobody owned the chain, and all of a sudden you basically can go and you cannot change it. And because you cannot change it, it's not like if you went and stored your hash into some database that somebody owned, because that person could have changed it. Here, the blockchain, you cannot change it, you see? So that's why it enabled multiple parties to work together, because nobody can change the hash. You understand? There are other architectures which tells you take the hash, put it into a database that a company owns. Well, if you do that, well, that company can change it under you. You don't know.
Of course.
So that's getting to the basics. So the second part is trust, right? That's why, because now you can do is there are 2 levels of trust. Number one, nobody changed that segment, that element, that subtree. And remember, the subtree itself points to the coordinate in the PDF. Remember, I showed you. And all of this is hashed. And so if you want to know, okay, that exact number come from where, not only from the DGML did not change, but you can even point to the PDF and say, okay, it came from there. So it's an entire chain of trust that basically DGML brings you. By the way, all of this is integrated into the open source reference that you can double check yourself. It's all open, and I'm very proud. It's all about Apache 2.0 license, meaning it's very it's very friendly to both organizations, but also open source communities, and all my life, the open source licensing are been very extremely important, so people can
For sure.
adopt it, and so that's kind of very proud that we use best of breed basically. The Apache Foundation is very respected, and so everybody trusts
100%.
legality. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for that. I think it shows it's the hard work, and obviously this has been your life for a long time, and it's really coming into fruition now in this new agentic world, which is exciting to see, and obviously exciting for us to be a part of. I think it's probably a good opportunity to take a few questions from the community. There's one I want to click on because I think it's a good one for us to have a little bit of a conversation around. And Katie was asking, most important, what is the estimate cost for enterprises to use DGML on a daily basis? So she's asking about the cost, and I want you to answer that question, but at the same time, I also want to use that to then talk a little bit about how this creates revenue for NVNM Chain too, because as the community knows, in the crypto space right now, everything is about revenue. It's a new meta, which is funny because it should be a meta for a long time, but this is an important thing to show how much revenue this can scale into the business. But first, maybe you can answer that question: how much does it cost to use DGML?
Well, so the answer is the same than when you're not using DGML. I mean, the differences are going to be, I don't know, we would publish those differences, but not really negligible, let's put it that way, because I already told you that people, what are doing today is they are generating Markdown instead of DGML. So let's back up a little bit. If you want to create an AI system that interrogates your documents, today you are paying a certain amount of tokens for LLMs to come and first pre-process your document to Markdown and then use it. So instead of creating Markdown, create DGML. That's why we are standardizing it, meaning we're opening that to everybody. The additional cost is zero. Let's just put it there. Okay, and that's why it's all standardized, and even this, the format itself, we are going to sit down with people, online, and make sure it's vetted. The format itself is vetted, because you don't even have to use the open source implementation we built. Remember, the spec is something, and so you can create your own. We created in Python. If you prefer something else, you can create another one in parallel, another language. That's the goal of separating the spec from the implementation. And so both of them are open, and but we are going to make sure that DGML stays coherent, of course. So we don't have many kind of flavors of the same format. So it's zero. That's kind of
perfect.
Yeah.
That's what I wanted you to say. It's zero, but it potentially can actually save you costs on tokens, and with better results, which is important.
That's right.
But as it pertains to the chain itself, there's two key components here, right? So every hash, every attestation is basically a transaction. Right?
Yes.
And these are going to be paid in stablecoin, which will then go to stakers. It will go to people who are validating on the blockchain. It will go to buybacks, all different sorts of things, which is part of the tokenomic model that we're working on. Not the AI tokenomics, but the NVNM tokenomics that the community is very excited about. So there's all these different components. That's just purely for attesting and hashing the first piece of information.
Yes.
That actually is nothing about consuming the information.
Exactly.
Right. So there's both the write function of putting the data on the blockchain via the metadata, but then there's also the consuming of that information via reading that information from the blockchain, and that's another cost that we're going to include. So basically, you're getting a bidirectional cost model, or revenue model, that both accessing and implementing the data is going to be charged. And that will be a significant revenue stream for NVNM.
Yeah. Remember, I basically helped create the open source subsidiary and the open source business at Microsoft. So remember, we are talking about, when you think about open source, don't think about it's like free beer or something. It's all revenue, right? What you do is just the good mix of open source, open standards to jumpstart something. But the real value is when you push on chain and you read from chain. And I really believe there are millions of agents that are going to need, because think about it. If as many people put their DGML on chain. Well, it's because those people who put their DGML believe that a third party wants to come and, let's say, start basically building agents that create, I don't know, derivatives. Like there are a lot of financial instrument that could be built using agents that go and scan this chain, and basically do a lot of things through, of course, the right permissions. And so they're going to read the chains a lot. And so it's basically two things: read and write. I mean, write first.
Well, just from experience, we were talking to an investor today, actually, this morning, and the first thing they do is they whip out their, AI reviewed version of the deck and all the different type of things, right? So any sort of thing you're going to do due diligence on, you're getting an agent to review the information, right? And we're talking, massive asset classes. We talked about real estate, private credit. These are multi-trillion dollar, markets. It's huge, right? The scale is almost even hard to fathom.
Absolutely. And if you look at at the DGML.io, I'm going to share again the screen if it's okay with you, so people can see it. We are talking. I think you can see now my screen. I went back to
here we go. Now it's good to go.
I went back to DGML.io. Here, again, all of this is public. You can see, a set of scenarios we really believe in. And those are 4 scenarios. There are many others. But just to give you ideas about, this is the business we're going after, right? So here, for example, you have a non-traded real estate fund, and there's always multiple parties. So there's on one side the CFO of a company who has a lot of value. On the other side, there's a guy called Theo, who is a valuation advisor, who really won't be able to stand behind the numbers. And then when he wants to stand behind the numbers, well, there's going to be an agent that, that I hope, everything is agent these days, which need to go through the chain and read all this information, because this is so the same thing here: commercial mortgage lenders, private credit funds, infrastructure fund. Those are examples. Please read them and look at them. Those are really vetted examples we are really going after. There are many others. This is absolutely not a limit. But I'm just giving you that this is something that we really believe in, which is why we're building all of this. Sorry.
Absolutely, and you have a really strong team. I know Alan Yates on your team is going to be leading a lot of the commercial efforts, the commercialization of this. You just maybe want to give a quick kind of a summary of Alan's background, because he's a pretty prolific guy in his own right.
Well, so we have, frankly, I was really lucky to be able to have a lot of people, really senior people, who joined me in Docugami. So Alan, for example, created the partner program of Microsoft. This thing that hundreds of thousands of people. He also helped me. He was a senior executive in the Microsoft office. When we were standardizing the DocX formats, we went around the world, talked to a lot of governments. So that's an example of Alan, who is really going to drive sales around this whole thing, and partnerships. Partnerships are super important. We really believe a lot in working with other people. And we remember this is really wired in our brain. We work technically with people. We work with partnerships. This is how you make the best thing. That's how I did it for the open source at Microsoft. And so that's kind of one thing. But I also have in my team very senior, researchers in AI, a lot of PhDs who has a lot of, published a lot of papers, including, in very recently, which shows that a lot of our AI, basically in logics, outperform a lot of others. So that's kind of one. I have also in my team a lot of former Microsoft engineers who helped me create a lot of the software, and left Microsoft to join me in Docugami. So both engineering, science, and go-to-market. I'm very lucky to have all these people working with me. And now the other thing is, I'm not exaggerating here. mantra and the whole community. And I'm learning a lot from you, because for me, have not been again the crypto or blockchain in any way, but I'm discovering that since we started working together. And frankly, it's just amazing, because the core technology is literally can replace a distributed database. I mean, remember, that's what we're talking about, right? So I come more from a platform technology point of view. But when you have multiple parties you want to do trust, there's nothing better than blockchain technologies at this point. If you want to have it where people respect your data, where you don't have to take all your data and give them to some place, to one person, right? Which nobody wants to do these days. I mean, everybody is talking about data sovereignty for a reason. My data, I own it, right? Like that seems basic, but that's kind of the most important, because then all of a sudden, well, I mean, people cannot just escape by accident. It's not only about malicious thing. It's just managing a lot of information, and that's the best system that I think could exist today. Again, other people are trying to do other. Basically, are telling you, give me your data and trust me. Well, okay. Well, I think that's better that you use blockchain and you trust yourself.
Absolutely. We want to be in a better state than trust me, bro. So fully agreed with you there. Well, we're getting to the kind of the top of the hour. So let's see if there's a few more questions that come in, and then we can wrap it up. But I really do appreciate the demo, the first demo we've had on a Community Connect, and a lot of the good questions. So let me just pull maybe one or two.
I love demos, and code talks. I always say code talks. So it's
absolutely. So I saw one from Manny Crypt. He had one. He was asking about the 4 layers: semantic, spatial, attestation, and readable. Could you maybe walk through what those are?
Yeah. So the first one is semantic. It means those tags that are they don't describe a piece of text as being in bold or italic, but it says it's actually a rent or an approved date or a price. So the word price, the word rent, that's what we call semantic. So DGML, I just described it. That's how it transforms documents into a semantic graph. Okay, those words. Spatial means, I told you that every subtree we remember from where it came into the PDF. We call that DG origin. So that's basically the coordinate into the page, and exactly the width and XY, width and weight from where it came. That's basically the spatial, what we called it spatial. Okay, and it's all in the format, meaning the DGML open source reference basically generate that. Okay, so each time you can go back to the origin from that's a spatial. Attestation is what I described, that we can go take this information, hash it, and put it on NVNM chain and in other chains. But that basically attestation. And readable, I did not talk about it yet, which is kind of fun. That with Markdown, many people love Markdown because you can read it as a developer. You can look at it, you can read it, you can actually, it's a format that is for human consumption. Well, when I was thinking about it with my friends and colleagues, we're thinking, well, we need to do the same thing here. So what we do actually is automatically, the AI that is used in DGML generate some piece of information in attribute. There is something called DG structure and DG DGML, DG structure and DG style, where it generates portion of HTML and portion of CSS in the DGML format. Okay, and those portions are not done to reproduce the original formatting in the PDF, because that would be useless, but it's done to be able to, with a very small, basically few lines of transform that we shipped as well, to transform it in an HTML file that you can read in every browser, which looks beautiful. Okay, so all of a sudden you can see your DGML not as a tree like I showed you. Okay, some people can look at it like this, but all of a sudden you can see it in a browser in a very readable way. And that's basically one of the characteristic of the format is you can read it in any browser, literally, and there is a small utility that does that, which literally is a few lines of code. You will be laughing when it does that. It just take those things and transform it to HTML. That's what it means, those 4 things. And with those 4, it basically, I don't know any other format that, frankly, or today that basically support those 4.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Angie's been asking a couple questions, so I think I can help her answer this one, which is, what are you expecting in the short to midterm for transaction volume, and how many customers will you onboarded plus which industry? So a lot of questions there, but I'll try to answer this a little bit. So without giving too much away, because a lot of these are going to be partnership specific, industry specific, and part of the rollout in GTM. But just to give you a sense, so we're talking about one client of NVNM IO that will be onboarding to NVNM Chain, attesting information that they're currently already doing. They're going to be utilizing DGML as well. And presently they're doing about, I think they would have roughly 12 million read and write style transactions of information with their clients on a regular basis. And this is a large real estate company. That alone, the revenue from that one client would put NVNM Chain in the top 15 of all blockchains by revenue just from one client on an annualized basis. They're expecting to 5x that in the next 12 to 18 months in terms of transaction revenue. So again, one client out of a laundry list, not to mention the other ones that we're going to be going after together, not to mention all the other use cases that we've talked about, like NVNM site earlier, not to mention anything else that we're working on DeFi activity, RWAs, etc. So you can kind of start getting a picture that the opportunity here is massive, and that's probably a good way to end it. Not only because it shows where this is headed, but it also is a little bit of a cliffhanger, because that will be the next kind of iteration of things that we're going to be sharing around tokenomics and stuff for the community to learn more about. So Jean Paoli, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure, as always, spending time with you. Looking forward to see you in the US in a few weeks. But thank you so much for the demo. Thank you for sharing with the community, and really excited to continue to build this use case out in the real world in an open source manner and on NVNM Chain. It's a very exciting endeavor.
No, it has been really a pleasure, and I really would like to ask your community, please come to the GitHub, give us feedback on everything, test it, participate. Really, it's really an open invitation, please. Okay, thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, guys. Appreciate it. Thanks everyone for coming on. Have a great day, evening, morning, wherever you are in the world, and stay safe.
Cheers. Thank you so much.